So after the keynote speakers, we now have another very important session, which is goes at the heart of why we're here, which is a discussion on the findings of the project that Professor Fu has been leading at the University of Oxford. And the project is called DILIC. It's the Diffusion of Innovation in Low-Income Countries. And we're actually delighted to have been working with Xiaolong over a number of years. And she's a really good and excellent grant holder in this respect. She really unpacks innovation and really thinks through the details of innovation and uses new data, thinks about surveys, new surveys, undertaking new surveys, and tries to be policy relevant as well as publishing in key journals. And so from the DFID-ESRC Growth Research Programme's point of view, she is a model grant holder, being able to combine both good quality research and thinking about networks around policy and joining the policy and academic communities. So it's absolutely a delight to us that you are able to now present the findings of your results. I suppose you can also see, and I want to point you to sort of a 10-point list of issues related to innovation. You will probably point to a range of those, but we'll hope that we'll be discussing these points during the conference. So over to you. You have about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we have a number of questions and answers.
Thank you, Dirk, for the kind introduction, and many thanks to everybody again to come to the conference. So in this session, I mainly will report the research findings from this ESRC DFID sponsored research on innovation in low-income countries. And I'm also lucky not only being able to be supported by the prestigious funding bodies, but also have excellent colleagues working together from UMerit, from STEPRI, Ghana. And also I'm also lucky to have excellent research fellows who work on this project, really driving. Working together with us to bring the research into fruitful as we have today. So this research, as I already mentioned, is sponsored by the ESRC and the DFID. And the main objective of this research at that moment is this is a research area really under-researched, heavily under-researched. And some people think innovation is not relevant for the low-income countries, or some people assume there's no innovation and creation in that context in Africa continent. Or some people think if you argue, you believe there are, and what type of innovation are taking place in that context, and what is the transmission diffusion mechanisms, and what are the constraints for firms in Africa to innovate, and what is the, what's the space for policy to support innovation in Africa? So in this project, we try to address this, and in particular, we want to understand the determinants of knowledge diffusion in low-income countries, and also the transmission mechanisms for knowledge diffusion from other countries to the low-income countries. So two issues. One is diffusion within, and another is transfer from outside to low-income countries. So this is the main objective. And the research findings, if I pick up the top 5, there are top 5 messages. First is innovation takes place everywhere. That's what we found. Which is unexpected, but it's real, in both the formal and the informal sectors, based on adoption and adaptation. That's the first message. The second message is we found knowledge external to the firm external to the firm is a major source of innovation in low-income countries. Much of this is derived in the country, within the country, and also around 1/3 comes from foreign countries. So knowledge external to the firm, both within the country and from other countries being diffused to the firms. The third message is firms in the low-income countries use open innovation to overcome the various constraints. They are facing resource constraint, skills constraint, institutional constraint, etc. And they are using open innovation to overcome this constraint. And innovation in low-income countries crucially depends on participation in value chains and the formation of regional production networks. Here to note, not necessarily global value chain, could be regional, African regional or national production chain, value chain. It's very helpful for innovation in those contexts, especially for diversification. And the South-South trade, we found, generates significant positive productivity gains as opposed, in contradictory to some news we heard from the newspaper or from the media. South-South trade sounds like monsters or wolf is coming. Actually, we found positive productivity gains. The fifth message is low-income countries generally lack adequate interaction between the private firms, the private sector, and the higher education institutions in the country. The university-industry linkage is fairly weak in Africa. The final key message we found is innovation is often constrained and unsupported in low-income countries, not recognized, and the lack of support. While innovation system, support system, is often inadequate or unknown to the firms. Our survey results later I will show many firms don't know there are support policies providing to them, but unknown to them. So these are the top 6 main findings. And before we move on to the research, first is what is innovation? And the innovation, what is innovation in low-income countries, in the informal sector? That's very important. We are thinking hard about the definition. Here we use the definition which provided in the Oslo menu, but also we made the modification. Innovation here is the creation or adoption of new product or process or new organizational or marketing practices. They could be new to the world, but also could be new to the firm. So not only those groundbreaking space shuttle type of innovation, but also new to the firm. They're doing something new to them. And also not only new technological, but also new managerial, non-technological innovation, which we found very dynamic in low-income countries, but also business models. And this includes the whole chain of innovation, not only R&D, research and development in the laboratory, but also diffusion, adoption, adaptation, and commercialization. We are looking at the whole innovation process. So that's what we refer to as innovation. So the research design, as Professor Lundva earlier has mentioned about, there are advantages and disadvantages of the qualitative case study approach, but also there are also advantage and disadvantage of large-scale data-based statistical analysis. So what we have done is use mixed methods. So we have carried out in-depth case studies, 32 case studies in Ghana, and use them to inform our design of the questionnaire and our later research. And then we carried out a firm-level survey of 500 firms in Ghana. So 500 firms is not a kind of big number for the UK, but 500 is a considerable achievement for an economy in Africa. the normal survey sample size is less than 200 in Africa, like carried out by NAPAD, and we have done a lot of effort to achieve more comprehensive population data and randomized stratification of the sample size, and include both the formal and the informal sector. So it's 250 formal firms and 250 informal firms in our sample. And we also used some other secondary data and the trade data to provide another type of study to give more broader context. And in Ghana, the sectors that we have focused are those sectors very crucial to the economy: textile apparel, food processing, mineral processing, and wood and furniture, and construction, which are very important sectors in the economy. That's our selection criteria. And we look at both technological and managerial innovation. So also different from the previous research, only looking at technological innovation, we also look at non-technological managerial innovation and business model innovation. And we compare this South-South, North-South collaboration, trade integration. And also, in addition to Ghana, we choose Ghana because this is a country has been growing very fast in Africa, which provides a good case and also has a relatively wide developed industries, which are also relevant for other African economies, allow Ghana become a good case for the case study. And also we have incorporate Tunisia, which also mentioned, which is a country without much natural resources, and looking at both the manufacturing and the services sector, and look at the role of innovation in that country. So we have a team from Oxford, UNU Merit, and STEPRI, Ghana, to carry out this research. So the theoretical framework, how to structure this big research, and we start from the National Innovation System Framework. However, we also recognize we are nowadays living in the globalization era. The integration between countries in terms of trade, in terms of investment, multinationals, in terms of ideas, internet, and because in terms of people flow. Not only Africans come a lot to Europe, to America, we see a lot of Africans go to China too. So people flow. So actually the country's national innovation system has been opened. Whether you are willing or not, you are opened up into the international knowledge pool, international global innovation system, and also international collaboration is more and more important. Therefore, we have an open national innovation system. And also, in addition to this extension, looking at it in an open perspective, and also I opened up this industry element in the NIS framework. So industry includes not only the firm, but also their suppliers, their customers, and their competitors, and other firms. So actually this is an ecosystem, innovation ecosystem. We put the firms in this perspective and look at how knowledge is created and diffused, transferred to the firms in the low-income countries in Africa. So that is the framework. We look at all the linkages, mechanisms, and try to unpack these linkages and the mechanisms. So the findings, I will present it, organize it in the following way. First is the nature of innovation in low-income countries. That's the first finding we're going to present. The second is about how important is innovation in low-income countries, how relevant is innovation for Africa. The third is look at the sources of innovation in low-income countries, both internal sources, domestic sources, and also external sources. And finally, we'll discuss the policy implications, which later in the afternoon we'll have a focused session on this. Now, the first is about the nature of innovation in low-income countries. And what we have done is we did both case study and survey. And what we have found out is innovation actually is widespread. It's everywhere in both the formal and the informal sector. If we assume informal sector, the informal firms are not innovative, and the research findings tell us we are wrong. The entrepreneurs, the informal firms are very innovative. And the innovation in their ways, as we have seen from the video, they interpret innovation, they define innovation as we are doing something new. So it's not traditional patent, how much patent, or how much high-tech products. They are doing something new. So new in terms of products, new in terms of process, in terms of their management of their production, in terms of how they marketing their products. So they are doing something new. And we found both in the formal and the informal sectors. And this is from our survey. We find the formal sectors, there are substantial firms report they have process innovation and also product innovation, as well as management innovation. And in the informal sector, also interesting, and we can see there are nearly 50% of the firms said they are doing something new in terms of production process. And also there are more than 20% of the firms saying that they are doing something new in terms of management and marketing their products. So innovation is in both the formal and the informal sector. And they are not R&D lab-based. It's about we're doing something new, and later I will show you it's learning-based. It's learning-based. We learn, and we observe, we imitate, we learn, and we adopt, we make adaptation. And also there are both non-technological and technological, as I have shown you. And it's diffusionary, learning-based, and incremental. And also, like this diagram show, a lot of innovation, if we divide innovation according to whether they are new to the market, groundbreaking, or they are just new to their firm. And we found most of the innovation reported in Ghana are new to the firm. So it's incremental. It's incremental and diffusionary, learning-based innovation. Learning-based innovation. So this is a type of innovation that we discover in Ghana. And what they do is they are addressing, they innovate, they're making something new in order to survive, in order to serve this low-income community, address various constraints using appropriate technology, and addressing the affordability issue and the accessibility issue, but also we observe it's a small proportion of firms talking about incubators. Like when I went to Ghana, I also heard people talking about incubators, talk about industry parks. So there is also some initiatives moving towards the high-tech part, although the majority is addressing this affordability, accessibility issue and the constraints that they face. Of course, we haven't observed major innovation which can, accelerate the structural change, because later I will show you because of various constraints, resource constraint and the skills constraint, etc. So that is the type of innovation that we found in Ghana. And how important is innovation? As I told you earlier, I went to Ghana, that's a real story, not something I make up. I was really questioned by policymakers and the senior advisors who used to work in World Bank. Why are you interested in this topic? And there are so much pressing issues for the government to face, and why should we put innovation as one of the priorities? So we talked to people in both the formal sector and the informal sector, and also in the government. And two striking comments I heard. The first is, I heard. First is an entrepreneur said, I survive because I innovate. I survive because I innovate. I have to, do something different, do something new, so as to survive and grow. So that is from the firms. And also we get a message from the Ministry of Environment and Science Technology to say we have to put innovation at the center of our development strategy. So there are recognitions at the policy-making level and also especially at the firm level. We see firms talking about how they are doing something new, allow them to survive and grow and expand. And we also have carried out statistical analysis of large longitudinal data. The first data is a cross-country data of 174 countries over 1992 to 2006 period. We are looking at this export sophistication, the value-added unit value of export products of the countries. And what we found out is the main factors affecting the contributing to the export upgrading is capital deepening and also knowledge creation and transfer through investment in education. Education is very important, and research and development, and the openness to FDI and trade. Because there are learning process in openness to trade and foreign direct investment. And also we used our survey data, those 500 firms, and we look at how different types of innovation are affecting labor productivity. And what we found out is the learning-based type of innovation has made significant contribution to labor productivity growth in Ghana instead of technical based innovation in the country. So case study interviews and cross-country and cross-firm analysis showing there is a significant positive impact of innovation and education and other learning mechanism like education, like openness to trade and FDI contribute to export upgrading and the TFP, to productivity growth. So it's important. Now, then we move on to the question, what are the sources of innovation in these countries? Where do they come from? This innovative idea, are they created within the firm or they are learned from other firms or learned from other countries? So this is the question. So first, I try to organize the questions in this way. The first block of question is the role of internal and external sources. What is the role of internal research and innovation within the firm, and what is the role of external knowledge sources? And the second block is to look at domestic sources. I unpack the domestic sources, look at various sources, look at what constraints firms facing, looking at how they are addressing these constraints by opening up their innovation process, how they are collaborating with the universities, whether women make firms led by women are different, in what way, and what are the impact of state policies in stimulating innovation, and also information technology, which is now penetrating quickly throughout African continent and also in other developing countries. What is the role of ICT? So that's the second block. The third block is look at external sources. So we compare various different external sources and also look at how exports contribute to learning, how South-South trade and investment, like investment from China, from India, from Brazil, are they different? Are they monsters? So we try to look at this and also look at Chinese multinationals too. So this is the structure, how we look at the different sources. The first is whether, the firm should create the knowledge innovation themselves, they should buy, they should acquire. The first question is either create or buy. And one of the research carried out by the PhD students linked to the project who now currently working at the World Bank used 1,500 firm data, panel data from Tunisia. What she found out is the impact of internal innovation in Tunisia is insignificant in terms of its contribution to productivity growth. But external innovation, which outsourced external to the firm has a positive and significant effect on TFP. And also my study using cross-country data, looking at export upgrading, also find out if we focus on the subsample of low and low middle income countries, we found the effect of R&D is insignificant, but that of imports, the effect of imports of FDI and of education are positive and significant, which means for the low and the low middle income countries, education, imports, FDI really contribute, made a significant contribution to its export upgrading, become more sophisticated, not only, export more, not export more commodities, but export products which have higher unit value. But R&D is insignificant. Of course, later we can discuss whether R&D is a good indicator of innovation in low-income countries. So this is first question, create or buy. We found external knowledge source are very important for those firms. And our survey also showing 50%, nearly 50% of the knowledge are from other firms within Ghana. So it's diffusion within the country. From other firms, that's a major source, but another 50% from outside Ghana, from the region, ECOWAS, or from Europe, from the US, and also from China and India. So we also see a wide spectrum of external sources, and they diffused to the country, and then some leading firms absorbed it and then diffused to other firms in the country. It's kind of cascade structure. And we also asked the firms, how do they learn? And what they told us is, we modified the product, how important is the external knowledge source. We modified the product in response to customers' requirement. We create together with customer, or we imitate. We observe and heard something new, and then we imitate with some modification. Or we imitate without modification. All these are, the top answers. The first one is 60% of the firms saying they are doing so, and nearly 50% of the firms respond to customers or, imitate with some modification. That's the first issue we addressed, external versus internal. And then we try to look at the domestic sources. There are a lot of domestic sources in the innovation ecosystem, through supply chain, through universities, and also government also play a role. So the first, of course, the question we are looking at is why are the firms not doing themselves? Yes, they face constraints. The major constraint is not surprising, but really is striking is the cost factor. Get very high score. Firms report that cost is the main constraint for them, prevent them from innovation, and the skills constraint, knowledge constraint is the second. So these are the top two constraints. There are also other market constraints and institutional constraints, but cost and skills suggest us policies that we need to address this. And what firms have done in facing these constraints, and what we found out is the firms opened up their innovation process to address this constraint. What they do is they collaborate with other firms or with other institutions, or they seek external sources. And what we found out is firms facing cost constraint, knowledge constraint, and market constraint, they open up their knowledge sources. They use a lot of external sources to tap in knowledge. And also respond not only in terms of how many different varieties of external sources, but also the depth of sources. How depth, in deep, they engage with external partners. They use a little bit more, or use a lot. And we found out when firms have cost and knowledge constraint, they really not only engage with more sources of knowledge, but also make greater engagement with these partners and sources. So they use open innovation to address this constraint. And also we found a kind of inverted U-shape relationship between openness and innovation, which means the firms become more open and they are more likely to innovate. However, this is not a straightforward linear relationship. It's an inverted U-shape. If you engage with too much, you cannot manage, and your innovation gains, your gains will be lower. Your gains will be lower. So this is an inverted U-shape. That's what we found out, how firms address. And we also look at this production chain. Or we call it value chain. So we ask firms, whether you are part of a production network, and we found, only 10% of the firms are part of a production network. So 90% are working alone, while 10% are in the chain. And this chain, very interesting, are mainly led by other firms in their region or in Ghana. Only 2% of the firms engaged in the chain are in a chain led by a global player. So most of this production chain, value chain, are regional or national value chain within Africa or within Ghana, rather than a global value chain. Rather than, because it's difficult for African firms to really enter into value chain led by a multinational like Microsoft or HP, because their requirement of standard and the quality are much different. However, the benefits, I would like to draw the attention to the final panel is, what's the benefit of participating in such production chain? And the firms told us that they are able to form the production capacity they would otherwise not be able to have by producing by a single firm. So by a list of firms, organizing in a production network, they are able to produce something of higher level of sophistication. Otherwise, they would not be able to produce by a single firm in Africa. So I think this is really very important message for us about diversification, and also about producing things of higher quality. So this is about production network. And we also look at the collaboration with university. In the UK, or even in China, university-industry linkage, it seems a wide observed phenomenon. However, in Africa, what we found out is only 8%, less than 10% of the firms reported that they have some collaboration with universities in Ghana. And more than 90% of the firms, they haven't. And again, interesting is it because they don't want? No. And more firms tell us, more than 30% of the firms tell us they are willing to engage with universities for innovation. However, they haven't, because of the reasons. Either, they tell us they're not interested in. The universities, the academics are not interested in this. I think they do not have the incentives. They do not have the incentives to do this, or we do not know each other, which means there is an information asymmetry there, which the government policy need to address by bringing the two sectors together, using policies and the funding incentives to bring them together, and also to incentivize the education system to engage with industry. So this is about university-industry linkage, which also give very important message for us, which is, give us very different picture from university-industry interaction in the UK or in the US, like in the Silicon Valley, which is widespread, or in China. And also we looked at another domestic issue is information technology. information technology. As we know, mentioned earlier, innovation technology, especially the mobile phone penetration, has been penetrated very fast in Africa, providing African firms and people the access to internet, to international knowledge very quickly. And what is the impact of ICT on innovation? And we have carried out a statistical analysis of this. And what we have found is having normal internet access for a firm does not make a difference to innovation. However, if you are purposely using internet for innovative knowledge sourcing, and the firms are significantly, more likely to have innovation in outcome and have higher innovation intensity. So firms, when they are using internet purposely for knowledge sourcing, they are more likely to have innovation and have greater innovation outputs, greater innovation output. But if we just say we have a computer or internet linked to the internet, computer linked to the internet, that doesn't make difference, which is the same like schools in Africa. If you just put a kind of TV screen in their classroom and do not really use it, that don't make difference in education. If you really use it, that will make difference. So this is the same for our ICT story, our ICT story. Another issue that many people are interested in, and also the two keynote speakers also have addressed, mentioned, is about the gender difference. Whether firms led by women, their performance in innovation is different, and whether there is any difference and how, in what ways they are different. And we have made a comparison of the firms, led managed by women and those compared to those led by men. And we find significant difference in some areas. It's not across the border, some differences, especially in terms of innovation new to the world, and which is innovation of higher novelty, and also innovation, process innovation and process innovation in the firm. However, also interestingly, is we found that firms led by women are more innovative in bringing out marketing innovation. They are less innovative in, less successful in bringing out novel innovation or technological innovation. But they do more non-technological marketing innovation. In a way, I think the case study that we have done, the interviews we have done in Ghana, informed us that women entrepreneurs are also very creative and ambitious. However, they are constrained by resources and also constrained by their education level. So that is probably also help to explain why they are creative, ambitious, but constrained by resources and the knowledge. So they do a lot of new things in marketing, but less in technological innovation, which requires more resources and novel innovation. And we also find that a unit increase in education make a significant difference in terms of innovation likelihood and innovation intensity, especially for firms led by women. Education has a significant effect on innovation in general, and the impact is higher for firms led by women. So this also has important policy implications for us. Okay, yeah. And also about policies, what we have found out is we asked the firms about the two major policy programs introduced by Ghanaian government, and nearly 90% of the firms tell us they have never heard about this, and both in the formal and the informal sector. And of course, some applied but rejected. But the majority have never heard about this. I think this information asymmetry is also an issue. Later, George probably also will address this later in the afternoon session. Now, let's look at the foreign sources. Move to the foreign sources quickly. The first is, in the survey, we have looked at actually 20 questions about external sources. We grouped them into 5 groups. The first is about trade and value chain. They know from trade and value chain source. The second is from multinationals in the country. The third is about foreign collaboration, collaborate with foreign institutions or firms or universities. The third is about skilled work mobility. The fifth is about other sources, mainly licensing, etc. And what we found out is value chain has the highest impact. And also the other sources, which including licensing and the internet. The contribution of FDI, multinationals, is not as high as we expected. It's not high as expected. And also we carried out some statistical analysis based on this 500 firm to draw more general insights. And what we found out, when we control the firm characteristics like their age, their sector, their size, etc., what we found out is trade and the value chain has a positive and significant impact, especially to the diffusionary learning-based innovation. And what helps the novel innovation in Africa, and we found out, is skilled labor mobility. It's the highly trained skilled labor, either worked in the foreign firms or educated abroad. When they're coming back, this made a significant contribution, to the novel, groundbreaking new innovation in Africa. And again, internet adoption has a significant and positive contribution to the innovation in African firms, both new to the firm and new to the world. And we found some difference in the formal and the informal sectors. Maybe later we'll come back and to discuss further about these details. The effect and the behavior of the formal and the informal sector are somewhat different. We also look at, into greater detail, especially the South-South issue. And we used a firm level and the regional, industrial regional level panel data in Ghana to look at the engage of Ghanaian firms with international trade. What's the impact on their productivity growth? And what's the difference between trade with China and trade with other countries? And we find out significant learning effects from trade in general, including gains from trading with China, And actually, our case study fieldwork told us, the firms told us, some machines are useful, but they're very expensive if they are produced in Germany or Japan. It's not affordable for me. So the Chinese machine is much cheaper. It's just 1/3 or a quarter of the price. I can afford. I use that, I do something new, and then do something better. So that is about South-South trade, and we found the benefits stronger in industries in which the country has comparative advantage. So in those industries, the learning effect is stronger than other industries. And we also look at, Chinese multinationals. Again, it's one of the concerns for policymakers and for academics and for practitioners. What is the impact of Chinese multinationals? Of course, in this research, we're not looking at other indirect effects through infrastructure, through education, from other aspects. We're looking at knowledge transfer. So we look at the construction sector in terms of managerial knowledge diffusion. In this sector, we compare Chinese to the Western multinationals. However, we found very limited managerial knowledge transfer from the Chinese multinationals to the Ghanaian partners because of language and culture barrier. Language and culture barrier is identified to be the significant factor to preventing this knowledge exchange between the two sides. However, we also have done a case study in the IT sector, in the high-tech sector, like Huawei. And what we found out is in Huawei, its interaction with the local subcontractors and the local employees is much stronger. In Huawei, nowadays nearly 80% of their employees are local employees, and they do provide training for their local employees, local managers, and they do face-to-face communication to their subcontractors to ensure the quality, and to ensure the quality. And they have regular weekly, monthly meetings with their kind of suppliers and their partners. And internally, they have group working, team working, and group meeting to disseminate the knowledge. So the picture is mixed. The knowledge transfer is uneven. So let me quickly go to the conclusions. So overall, in this research, if we come back to the framework, we try to address, various transmission mechanisms in this open innovation system, looking at the interactions between the firms with the supplier, their customer, with the state, with university, and with the international knowledge pool through trade, value chain, multinational FDI, and other linkages like labor, people mobility, and through innovation, open innovation. And also, we have focused on the issues like gender, open innovation value chain, South-South, North-South, etc., and also address this external versus internal issue. So the main messages, again, is innovation takes place everywhere, in both the formal and informal sectors. But they are learning, adaptation, adaptation-based. And external knowledge are very important for innovation in firms in the low-income countries. And the firms in low-income countries use open innovation to help them to overcome these various constraints. And also participation in the value chain, especially the regional, national production networks, are very important for firms to innovate and to diversify. We'll also find South-South trade bringing significant positive gains for productivity. And we also find out that the interactions between universities and higher education institutions is weak in Africa. And the internet has served as an important channel for knowledge diffusion. And also we found a significant gender difference. And the education is a very important factor to promote innovation in Africa, especially for firms led by women. The knowledge transfer from multinationals is not as strong as we have expected, and it's uneven, and more research needs to be done to understand this. And in terms of policy support, the support system is either inadequate, especially unknown to the firms. So these are the main findings from the research. The research has limitations, and also we are looking forward to take next step. And also, I think comments from you and from the speakers today will help us to define next step.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Many thanks.
So that's been a brilliant presentation. And I mean, apart from all the journal articles that you've done and the reports that you've done, you've also sort of highlighted a range of issues around open innovation systems that have been discussed also in your book that you recently launched as well. And I think before the conference started, there was a video was shown with some of the points that you also raised at the beginning of where does innovation happen, and I think the package of products that you have to eliminate issues around innovation is really impressive, and that's really good. I noted down a couple of sort of notable issues here that we may want to discuss, and of course your 10 points is very helpful there. But of course, I mean, innovation is everywhere, and I think that is something, just an eye opener for some, maybe not for all, but for some at least. And I think that's really important, is that it's everywhere around us. Issues around importing, they are a double-edged sword, I suppose. So at the beginning of the conference we were talking about the problems of importing, but there's also some positive stories out there as well about importing technology. Global value chains has been discussed, so that's been it's also a new issue in innovation, I think, that we need to put on the table. Your research shows that it's very important to think about taking into global value chains, because that's a major source of innovation. And that also is slightly different with what we heard in the morning, in the sense that, or the approach might be slightly different in the sense that we were moving from one sector to another. Here it is actually saying, well, you need to find your niche in a particular chain of sectors, of activities. So it might be a slightly different approach that we may want to discuss as well. And some other issues that you touched on, so ICT was really important. Interesting point about gender, I think, was really sort of different types of innovation that we could discuss. And I think what I found also very important, and I found also in my work in Tanzania, in Nigeria, and other countries, as part of the economic transformation program that I direct, is that the lack of interaction between the public and the private sector, so or between support systems and private firms, and I think that's something that really needs to be tackled, and we need to think that through. So how is it possible that there is so little interaction between education systems and private firms? How is that possible? What can be done to help move that forward? What is the sort of the institutional setup that could be looked at in addition to any of the funding sources that might be important? So a range of important issues here, lots more. So let's have some 10 to 15 minutes time for questions and answers before we go to the lunch. So the gentleman over here, and then we can move to Rafi.